Welcome to Module 2, Executive Functioning Foundations. By the end, you'll be able to explain executive functioning in family-friendly language, spot it in a session, and build it into everything you do. By the end of this module, you'll be able to explain executive functioning in family-friendly language, identify executive functioning challenges during a session, recognize the difference between a skill deficit and a performance deficit, embed executive functioning support into every session, and select interventions that promote independence rather than dependence. Let's start with the basics. What is executive functioning? Executive functioning is the set of mental processes that help us plan, organize, initiate, sustain, regulate, and complete goal-directed tasks. Here are two ways to explain this simply. First, executive functioning is the brain's management system. Intelligence is the engine, executive functioning is the driver. So, for parents, they can imagine their child has a computer with incredible processing power, but the operating system keeps freezing. That's what executive functioning challenges can feel like. Now, let's talk about why executive functioning matters so much. Executive functioning touches nearly every part of a student's day, from starting their homework, remembering their assignments, turning the work in, studying effectively, managing their emotions, completing long-term assignments, organizing their backpacks, trying to manage their time, trying to follow multi-step directions, and working independently. Now, take a moment to think of a student who is bright but consistently struggles. Which executive functioning skills might be affecting them? Next, let's walk through the core executive function skills. For each one, we'll cover the definition, the signs of difficulty, and strategies that you can use. Response inhibition means pausing before acting. Signs of issues with response inhibition come out through blurting out answers, interrupting a lot, rushing through work, and skipping directions. Some strategies you could try is using a wait time before the student gets started, having them pause and wait a designated time period before they're able to answer the question. Another idea for a strategy is the verbal cue pause. What's the plan? So before they jump into a problem or start a task, before starting, they need to pause and have a plan of action. Also, creating self monitoring checklists with the students so they can self monitor. For example, before I begin, they might have a checklist. I know what I'm supposed to do. I have all my materials. I know my first step. My workspace is ready. I have a plan if I get stuck. Working memory means holding and manipulating information. It's holding on to information in your brain while you're doing another task. A great example of this is when you're at the grocery store and you forgot your shopping list at home, so you are trying to hold on to the information that you need for the items that you need at the store, but you're also trying to figure out, the best vegetable you're going to pick out, or thinking about that your next plan for the day, that you've got to go pick up your child at soccer practice. So there's a lot of things that are happening in your brain while you're holding on to this information, and that's because that's working memory. Everybody's working memory has a threshold. Some students have lower, some are higher, but they all reach a point where it's too much. And then as soon as you cross that threshold, the memory is useless and everything goes out the window. So it's really important to understand how working memory affects learning, and affects students not just in day-to-day routines, but really in their schoolwork and academic work. It can look like forgetting directions halfway through, um, losing your place in a multi-step math problem, or constantly needing reminders repeated. So, some strategies to work through this and support the working memory is by chunking directions, not giving them all at once. I think the research shows that most people can hold on to four different pieces of information at one time in their working memory on average. So you have to assume that some people can only hold two. So by chunking directions, you're only giving them a small amount of directions at one time. Using visual supports the whole time. This works for all students, constantly having some way of, if they forget if it's not being held in their working memory, they can just refer to a visual support aid. Also, whiteboards and having the student teach it back to you has become a really effective practice in getting that information from working memory into long-term memory. So working memory is sort of the funnel. So if by having the student teach it back to you, it actually um, has a better chance of securing in long-term memory, which is ultimately where we want it to go. Emotional control sort of comes up the top of the chain, if you will. It's managing emotions while working. I mean, it's generally just being in control of your emotions in a way that makes sense to the situation. So this becomes one of the biggest challenges with students with ADHD who really struggle with emotional control. This is what really gets parents having a tough time reaching out, overwhelmed. So, although this is technically, out of our scope, at the same time, it's important as clinicians that we help support the regulation of their emotions so that their brain is primed for learning. And on top, in that regards, it's very important for the clinician themselves to be in control of their emotions in order to meet the student at a level of emotional control. If the clinician is feeling triggered, upset, frustrated, then the student will not have an ability to regulate their emotions um, based off yours. So, if emotional control looks very different depending on the student and their diagnosis. It can look like giving up easily, um, not wanting to do hard things, crying easily, also a sense of perfectionism, anger, and anxiety. So they might show up differently for the different students. Important to know your students so that you can sort of understand the best way to support their regulation. Really, letting them know that mistakes are part of the process. It's okay to make mistakes, so that they're not, so hard on themselves. Using a growth mindset language format with them. Um, Co-regulation, which is that making sure that the clinician is regulated so that the student can meet them there. Taking a lot of breaks. They've had a long day at school most times and they are fried, and they've been trying to hold it together during the school day, so it's a lot harder after school. And so supporting them with different coping strategies. Some students are into mindfulness and meditation, some are not. I would say don't force it on them if they're not open to it. There's different, if they reach that threshold of emotional control, some students want to be left alone. Other students sort of need to take help. Can maybe guide them on a little walk or get a water, and help them develop ways that when you're not there, that they can use to successfully regulate. There's all different sorts of techniques, and I'm happy to connect with you if you feel like this is something you would like more input on. Sustained attention means maintaining focus over a period of time. It can look like constant redirection, looking around the room, or switching topics if there's attention is not being sustained. Um, the introduction of medication for ADHD kids, I see the biggest improvement with their sustained attention. I think it really helps support that executive functioning skill. There are different ways to kind of support sustained attention, and one way is using the Pomodoro technique, which is you essentially using timers to work for a period of time and then take a small brain break. So during the working period, usually, I've read that, it's possible to do your age, the student's age plus 1. I it That's rough. Some students can only give you 5 minutes at a time, 4 minutes at a time. So whatever kind of you feel their abilities are at that point. And then the goal would be to increase that time period moving forward. So if you start at a sustained attention time of 5 minutes and you take a 3-minute brain break, maybe the next week you try for 6 minutes. So you're slowly increasing that ability to remain focused for an extended period of time. Engagement, frequent engagement. So making sure that student is engaged, and um, if they seem to be zoning out, you can figure out a game or using manipulatives or some sort of way to re-engage them, asking them questions, finding something that interests them, bringing their awareness back to it. Movement breaks are wonderful. So every time, and even movement during the focus session. That's why fidgets work really well for some kids. Also, bouncing on the yoga ball works really well sometimes. You just again have to know your student and know, well, is this a distractor or is this effective? Um, and then with the short work intervals, that's with the timing with the Pomodoro technique. Task initiation means starting work without excessive delay. It can look like staring, saying, "I don't know." A lot of students jump into that, "I don't know." Or a pencil that just doesn't touch the paper, or a keyboard that just doesn't get used. So, the "I don't know" comment um, is sometimes a processing issue. So if you just give the student time to process the information before just jumping in with the answer, it's extremely effective. So don't just jump in to help them right away. Wait a few seconds, or actually, more than a few seconds, and then you can help them. Um, so also making sure that the student has a start point and an end point. So having them clearly understand their first step is super important to get started. Um, Along with that is making sure that it's not too overwhelming of a task. That makes it very hard for them. They shut down. So maybe only focusing on a couple, maybe writing out the steps, but only saying that you guys are going to accomplish 2 steps of this. So they have a very clear start point and a very clear end point. So they know they're not just going into the abyss. And so that really helps with initiation. Also, if you sometimes kids like competitiveness, they like so some kids do really well with having some sort of timing effect to it. Some really don't, and that increases their anxiety. So it's really important to understand, know your student. And so and gamifying things, making it like um a game, like and you know, you can do these 2, and if I can do this and this, and I'll do this task in the same amount of time. Let's see who finishes first, something like that. So kind of those steps that kind of trigger that dopamine, get them like motivated. Um, and then reducing activation energy, body doubling, which is really effective. So just sometimes just being there, even if you're not actively working with the student, that's what we call body doubling. And it can actually increase the student's independence a lot. It can help get them started on tasks. That's why going to Starbucks and coffee shops and everything and libraries can be really effective in task initiation because everybody there is working and focused. And so monkey see, monkey do kind of thing. So even if a student is resistant to having you um, work with them, sometimes just quietly working alongside of them and then being available for them as if they need help is can be really effective in getting through work. Um, also visual countdowns, knowing again that their time is coming to an end. So utilizing that Pomodoro technique where you have the countdown timer, so they know, okay, I only have to do this for 5 minutes and I get a break. That can really help the task initiation, especially if you say, okay, we're going to start now, 5 minutes. So, and then you get a break. So, um, keeping things manageable for them and not overwhelming is a big, big part of it. Um, so, planning and prioritization are biggies, especially with our kiddos with ADHD. And it means creating a roadmap before beginning, having a plan, um, knowing what to do, what comes next, which is also really important, like we said, for task initiation. So, uh, if you don't have a plan, a lot of students will just start writing immediately. That's a big thing you'll see in writing. Um, and I emphasize to them, even though it seems like more work to them, that if they use a graphic organizer and plan their writing, all their thinking part is done. They don't have to do that again. So let's separate that, get all the planning done. So you're actually, even though it seems like more work, to them it seems like more work to plan their writing. It ends up being less work in the end because there's more of a roadmap and a guide. Um, so that's super important is the graphic organizers. Um, and then also it can also look like kids who struggle with that, just work in random order, no sense of what's urgent. They might have a project due in 2 weeks, but it's fun for them. So they're like, well, we're going to start on this one. I want to start on this one because this one seems fun when they have a writing assignment due the next day. So that's an issue with prioritization. So really helping them understand, okay, what is due, what's the biggest concern right now, um, and then go from there. And you can use different graphic organizers actually to kind of help prioritize things. Also, backward planning for big projects. Which is part of the Seeing My Time unit that we we use, and I'm happy to show you that. Just ask me for an instruction about that. Um, Also, think aloud modeling. So that's really effective in a lot of areas. Is as you, the clinician, are helping them work through their stuff, thinking, just explaining as you're thinking as you're going. So um, saying, I'm going to put the study for the Spanish test under Tuesday because I think Tuesday you don't have soccer practice. So it would be a good day to study. Things like that, where you're kind of showing them your thought process as you're working through it. Our lovely friend organization. Yes. So organization means managing materials and information. So an unorganized, a person who struggles with organization, obviously, the backpack is a big one. A lot of disorder in backpack and lockers. Lots of missing homework assignments, papers everywhere, no organizational system. Losing papers, not making it from point A to point B. So it's pretty self-explanatory what organization means. And this is a big one that we have to help our students utilize the skills that we teach them, because meeting with the clinician uh, will provide some sort of accountability for them. So if you do backpack checks every time you meet with them, helping them find a system that works for them. Maybe it's folders instead of a big binder. Things like that that really help keep them organized. And it's important to if one strategy doesn't work, then let's try another. It's not a failure. It's just a lens to see what we need to shift and change, what's working, what's not. So the accountability to you, the clinician, is a big one. And so you can check in every week, make sure that things are staying organized for them, but setting them up with systems, helping them find the ones that work for them, is a big part of navigating the process with the journey with the student. Time management is another big executive functioning skill that people struggle with. Since we use the program Seeing My Time for time management, I'm not going to go into it too much here. I will at some point provide a training online with Seeing My Time so that you can get a more in depth look at strategies to support time management. But for now, it's time management is estimating and using time effectively. So homework assignments that take a long time, that when they're chronically late, procrastination, so waiting till the last minute to do big projects, things like that. So there's different avenues. I think Seeing My Time does a great job of helping kids structure their time effectively. Some other just quick um, supports are visual timers, so they can see the length of 10 minutes, how long they have left. Um, the time timers are really good at that. And then time estimation games are great for them to learn what actually is 2 minutes. How does that feel in your body? What if it is 2 minutes the same when you're doing something boring or when you're doing something fun? Having them and doing estimating games, like how long do you think this will take? And then actually timing it, things like that. So they can get a sense of time is so vague, and they really need structure to understand a sense of time and what time actually is. Flexibility means adjusting when things change. It can look like meltdowns, refusing a new strategy, or perfectionism. So you can try practicing multiple solutions, normalizing change, and flexible thinking language. Self-monitoring means checking your own work and behavior. It can look like saying, I'm done after 30 seconds and not noticing mistakes. So you can try self-rating scales, rubrics, and reflection questions. The next section covers a critical mindset shift, that executive functioning isn't laziness. Parents will often say things like, they just don't care, they're being lazy, or they're so smart, they're just not trying. But as clinicians, we need to reframe that thinking. Instead of asking, why aren't they motivated? You can ask, what executive functioning skill is making this difficult? A lot of times students have lagging skills, and so it's important for us to figure out as clinicians what is lagging here that we can build upon. Let's talk about observation skills, learning to notice executive functioning in real time. Here's an example. A student opens their backpack. Instead of just seeing messiness, a trained clinician asks, is this about planning, organization, task initiation, working memory, or flexibility? Learning to see the underlying skill is the goal. Now let's introduce a framework you'll use in every session, the ALC Executive Functioning Observation Framework. This framework has 5 steps. The first step is to observe what executive functioning skills are showing up. Next is to identify which skills are getting in the way, which executive functioning skills are lagging here. Support. What scaffold can I provide? Step 4 is fade. How can I reduce my support over time? And number 5 is reflect. Can the student identify what helped? This becomes part of every clinician's routine. And in the reflection, having them answer the question of what worked, what didn't work. Now let's talk about scaffolding, the different levels of support we provide. There are 4 levels here. The first level, the clinician models. Level 2, the clinician and the student do it together. Level 3, the student completes it with reminders or visual supports. Level 4, the student completes it independently. The goal is always to move towards independence. This has also been known to be the I do, we do, you do method. Let's apply what we've learned to 4 case studies. Student 1 is a bright 6th grader. Homework never gets turned in, their locker is a disaster, and they get 0 despite understanding the content. Which executive functioning skills are weak here? Student 2 starts crying after one mistake and refuses corrections. What executive functioning skill is at play? Student 3 needs every direction repeated. Is this working memory, language processing, attention? How would you tell the difference? Student 4 completes assignments, but it takes 3 hours. Is this time management, perfectionism, attention, processing speed? Think about how you'd gather more information before deciding. Now let's talk about a key ALC principle, executive functioning during every session. Every session should strengthen at least one executive functioning skill, even if the primary focus is reading, writing, or math. In math, that might be planning, working memory, or error checking. In writing, it's organization, planning, and flexibility. In reading, it's attention, self-monitoring, and cognitive flexibility. And in homework support, it's time management, task initiation, and prioritization. Finally, let's talk about parent communication. Use strengths-based language. Instead of "she isn't organized," say "she benefits from external systems because organization isn't automatic yet." Instead of "he refuses to work" or "he's resistant," say "he has difficulty with initiating tasks when they're overwhelming to him." Breaking work into smaller starting points has really helped. Now it's time for a knowledge check with some scenario-based questions. Question 1. Which executive functioning skill is most likely affecting a student who understands math but forgets each step in a multi-step problem? Question 2. A student says, "I don't know where to start" before every writing assignment. Which skill would you target first? Question 3. During a session, a student becomes upset after making one mistake. What should your first response be? Question 4. Which scaffold would you use to support planning without taking over the task? Question 5. How would you explain executive functioning to a parent in everyday language? Thank you for completing Module 2, Executive Functioning Foundations. Next up is Module 3.